They said no one could have survived. No air, no food, no help. An entire colony wiped clean from every star map in the galaxy. But the data, it does not lie. 13 years after the fall, a signal pulsed through the void. A signal coming from the very planet they swore was dead. According to surviving records, something down there adapted, endured, and watched. Whatever it was no longer just human. This is not a story about heroes. This is the story of the colony that shouldn't have survived. For 2 centuries, the name Outpost Theta was nothing more than a ghost in galactic records, a doomed human settlement at the edge of the Perseus Arm, swallowed by storms and silence. No reinforcements, no communications, no survivors. That was the story the Galactic Council told. But the truth, uncovered 200 years later, tells something far more unsettling. Outpost Theta was established during humanity's second expansion wave, a small research hub meant to study the mineral anomalies on a world called Aurelia 9. The planet was infamous even then, storms that raged for weeks, magnetic fields so chaotic that orbiting sensors failed within hours, lightning that turned the skies into rivers of fire. It was the last place any rational species would choose to live. And yet, humanity, in its eternal defiance of logic, chose it anyway. The mission was officially designated Experimental Frontier Initiative Theta. Unofficially, among the Council and the other member species, it was called the Suicide Mission. Records from the time show fierce opposition from non-human delegates. One Corthan representative, a species known for its cold logic, summarized it best. Humans exhibit a pathological disregard for environmental risk factors. No logical entity would establish a settlement under those conditions. Despite every warning, the ship Horizon's Wake launched, carrying 120 colonists, scientists, engineers, and veterans who had seen too much and still volunteered for more. They landed on Aurelia 9, built a small base among the canyons, and began transmitting data to the Union. For a brief moment, it seemed humanity had once again done the impossible. Then silence. The final message received from Outpost Theta arrived 1.4 cycles after landing. It was heavily corrupted, the audio fragmented by static and magnetic interference. Only one line remained clear. "We're not alone down here." After that, nothing. No rescue missions were ever sent. The storms made orbital scans impossible, and no ship could survive long enough to attempt recovery. Outpost Theta was erased from all active records, listed as a total loss. For generations, it became little more than a cautionary tale told by xenologists about human recklessness. That changed when the Perseus Archive Recovery Initiative began centuries later. A team of data archaeologists, combing through abandoned Union relays, found an encrypted cluster buried beneath layers of corrupted code. When decrypted, it revealed something no one expected. Fragments of transmissions from Outpost Theta, logs, environmental data, even video files, recorded by an automated system known as Archive Unit 7. The contents of that archive would upend everything the galaxy thought it knew about human survival. Aurelia 9 was, by every measurable standard, uninhabitable. The atmosphere was toxic to most Terran plant life, temperatures swung by 70 degrees between day and night, and magnetic storms crippled all wireless systems. Even with full supply lines and orbital support, a colony there would struggle. But Outpost Theta had neither. The Horizon's Wake carried supplies for 6 months. Their main reactor shielding failed in 3. Weather systems were useless. Communication range dropped to a few hundred meters. By all logic, they should have been dead before the first year ended. And yet, they endured. The first logs recovered from Archive Unit 7 belonged to Captain Mira Solon, the colony commander. Her voice, grainy and tired, painted a picture of determination that bordered on madness. The storms knocked out our comms again. We've lost 2 turbines, half the hydroponics bay and most of our sensor relays. But no one's giving up, not yet. The team's building insulated shelters out of ship hull plating. We'll adapt. We always do. Adapt. That word would become the key to everything that followed. Even as technology failed, the colonists found new ways to survive. They stripped their shuttle hulls to build storm-proof shelters. They used scavenged metal and wiring to create manual turbines that converted lightning discharges into crude energy storage. When hydroponics failed, they turned to local fungi, originally toxic to humans. By testing, heating, and filtering, they found a way to make it edible. What other species would have seen as poison, they turned into nourishment. By the end of the first year, the colony had stopped functioning as a research outpost and had become something else, something primal. According to the recovered data, their command structure dissolved. Authority shifted to necessity. Engineers became farmers, scientists became hunters, and new roles emerged. Storm watchers, colonists who learned to read the sky. They could feel when a lightning surge was coming by, watching the color of the clouds and sensing the charge in the air. It was not technology anymore. It was instinct. By the second year, Captain Solon wrote, "We've stopped waiting for rescue. The storms will never clear. The council isn't coming, but the planet has rhythm. We can read it now. We've mapped the lightning fields, the safe zones, the caves. We're learning to live with the storm instead of against it." What began as defiance had turned into harmony. The colonists no longer fought Aurelia 9. They listened to it, but not everything in the logs was about survival. As months turned into years, new entries described strange phenomena. Shadows that moved through the storm, shapes of light that flickered between thunderclaps. At first, analysts believed these were hallucinations born from isolation and stress. Then the recovered data logs showed faint biosignatures matching those timeframes. Something else had been moving on that planet. Solon's later logs became increasingly fragmented, her tone changing from pragmatic leadership to wary observation. "They're not ghosts," one entry read. "They move when the storms rise. They glow like the lightning itself. They watch from the ridges, never closer. We don't know if they mean harm, but they're learning from us." That was her final transmission. 2 days later, the log stopped. For centuries, that silence was the end of the story. The galaxy assumed the colonists perished. But when Archive Unit 7 was decrypted in full, something strange emerged. Data inconsistencies that suggested continued human biosignatures for at least another decade after the last official log. Environmental readings changed, too. Oxygen levels stabilized. The storms lessened in frequency around the colony's coordinates. It was as if the planet itself had changed in response to them. No one could explain it. Some theorized that the colonists had discovered a method of manipulating the electromagnetic field of Aurelia 9. Others believed the so-called shadows were native life forms that learned to coexist, or perhaps merge, with the humans. Whatever the truth was, the evidence defied all known science. And that is where the story of Outpost Theta transforms from tragedy to legend. The official record claims that no colony could have survived beyond a year, yet the data recovered from Archive Unit 7 suggests they not only survived, they adapted in ways that challenge the very definition of what it means to be human. The longer the historian studied the files, the clearer one truth became. Outpost Theta didn't die. It evolved. The logs end abruptly as though the system was deliberately shut down. But in the final fragments, one message repeats across corrupted code, a line buried deep in the static, barely audible but unmistakably human. "We changed so we could stay." For the Galactic Council, that phrase was terrifying. For humanity, it was proof of something far greater. Outpost Theta shouldn't have survived, but it did. and what came out of those storms might no longer have been entirely human. The records end there. The planet remains off-limits, officially designated a restricted system. But among the researchers who uncovered the data, whispers persist. Whispers that somewhere, deep beneath Aurelia's eternal thunder, something still watches. Something that remembers the storm. Something that remembers being human. I have spent years studying records, deciphering corrupted archives, and piecing together timelines that were never meant to be reconstructed. Yet nothing, no war dossier, no lost expedition file, has ever unsettled me like the case of Outpost Theta. After that final transmission, we changed so we could stay, the colony officially vanished. But data does not lie, not completely. The deeper I searched, the more I began to realize that their disappearance was not an ending, it was a transformation. The second wave of recovered logs begins not with Captain Mira Solon, but with Lieutenant Joran Halvik, the colony's lead systems engineer. His files were buried in the deepest layer of Archive Unit 7, locked behind 6 layers of encrypted code. He must have intended them to survive, even if everything else failed. His tone is calm at first, clinical, the way trained engineers speak when cataloging their world. Day 486, he says, voice filtered through static. Storm intensity decreasing by 4% over the last 3 weeks. Wind shear has shifted 15 degrees east. It feels like the planet's breathing differently. That phrase, breathing differently, appears dozens of times throughout his later logs. It is not scientific language. It is human language trying to describe something that does not fit existing categories. He noted that the storm cycle, previously random and violent, began to fall into an almost predictable rhythm. Lightning surges aligned with their energy collection arrays. Rainfall patterns shifted closer to the colony's underground farming caverns. It was as if the planet had begun syncing itself with the colonists. According to the meteorological simulations I ran while studying these logs, such atmospheric harmonization is impossible without external manipulation. Yet Halvik's entries suggest no new technology was introduced. In fact, their remaining systems were degrading rapidly. By day 620, their last functional reactor was running at 31% capacity. By day 720, the satellite relay was nothing but scrap metal. And still, they lived. The key to their survival seemed to lie in something far older than machines. The logs detail rituals, patterns of behavior that emerged among the survivors. Every storm night, they would gather near the lightning fields, not in fear, but in quiet observation. They spoke of feeling currents under the skin, a phrase repeated by several colonists. Over time, these sessions became structured. A group called The Watch formed, men and women who claimed they could sense shifts in the storm before instruments could. By the end of year 3, every colonist participated in the watch. According to surviving data logs, they altered their sleeping cycles, their agriculture, even their speech rhythms around the planet's electromagnetic pulses. Their biology did not just adapt, they reorganized their lives around the pulse of Aurelia 9. And this is where the data begins to blur the line between science and something. We have no language for biometric readings embedded in the environmental scanners. Show subtle but consistent physiological changes among the surviving population. Elevated nerve conductivity, unusual synchronization in heart rates during storm activity, variations in melatonin cycles aligned not with solar light, but with magnetic surges. Their bodies were, in a very real sense, becoming attuned to the storm. Lieutenant Halvik notes this too. We're not fighting it anymore. We listen, we match it. It listens back. I have replayed that line hundreds of times. It listens back. This is not the language of a man simply surviving a hostile world. This is the language of someone who has entered into a dialogue with it. Several transmissions describe encounters with what the colonists called the luminous. Initially believed to be hallucinations, the figures were described as humanoid silhouettes of flickering light, always appearing at the height of the storm, never attacking, never speaking, only watching. At first the colonists feared them. Then over the years, fear turned to acceptance, and eventually to reverence. A series of recovered recordings captures quiet chants, not in any known liturgical pattern, but rhythmic, pulsed like the beating of a heart. In the background, faintly, storm winds echo through the metallic corridors. Lieutenant Halvik's final clear log reads, "We are learning from them, or maybe they're learning from us. I'm not sure where the line is anymore." Council analysts originally dismissed these recordings as the ravings of an isolated population succumbing to environmental madness. But biometric and environmental data argue otherwise. The colony was stabilizing, health metrics improving, food production rising, energy efficiency increasing. No known madness leads to functional harmony with a death world. The most alarming discovery came from an incomplete log, dated Year 5, Day 1103. The audio is heavily fragmented, but a section of Halvik's voice remains intelligible. "We changed to fit this place. It's not just survival anymore, it's belonging." After that, no further voice logs appear. What follows instead is something stranger. Digital signatures embedded in electromagnetic pulses. Not text, not audio, but sequences of structured frequencies repeating at precise intervals. At first, my team assumed these were natural planetary signals. Then we compared them to pre-collapse voice patterns of the colonists. The frequencies matched. The colony, in some capacity, had begun communicating not through spoken language or technology, but through the storm itself. It is difficult to explain to anyone who has not spent decades studying the outer colonies what this means. Humanity has a long history of bending worlds to its will, terraforming, atmospheric manipulation, seismic stabilization. Our species has always conquered nature. But Outpost Theta did not conquer Aurelia 9, they merged with it. The Council's own restricted analysis from 312 years after the colony's loss reached the same quiet conclusion. The colonists were no longer strictly human. Whether this was symbiosis with native life forms, an evolutionary leap induced by constant electromagnetic exposure, or something else entirely remains unknown. What is clear, however, is that they stopped being a colony and became part of a planetary system, an organism with a human core and a storm as its skin. The recovered frequencies were later traced to a persistent, low-level magnetic field anomaly still active on Aurelia 9. It pulses every 22 hours, on schedule, like a planetary heartbeat. No human life signatures have been confirmed since the last logs. But something remains, something synchronized. When the Council proposed sending an expedition to investigate, the vote was split. Half argued that Aurelia 9 represented a scientific breakthrough beyond comprehension. The other half feared what they might find. One voice in the transcript, an old senator, said, "If they became the storm, what happens when we knock on its door?" The proposal was quietly buried. Aurelia 9 remains quarantined, designated a Class Red anomaly. All travel is forbidden, yet researchers like me still watch the pulse. We still listen, and every cycle, without fail, the storm whispers back. I have studied the great collapses of history. Empires swallowed by their own ambition, fleets lost to the dark between stars. But Outpost Theta became something the galaxy was not prepared to understand. We lost a colony, but perhaps in a way Aurelia 9 gained a people. And in the pulse of the storm, in the rhythm that has not missed a single beat for over 3 centuries, I sometimes wonder, did they truly vanish? Or did they simply stop being human in a way we can recognize? The data cannot answer that, but the storm remembers. It always remembers. The deeper I went into the records, the stranger it became. I had expected cold data, numbers, reports of a failed colony swallowed by circumstance. But what I found buried beneath layers of encrypted archives was different. It was as though someone had deliberately tried to erase the very shape of what happened here. The files did not degrade naturally. They were cut, clean, precise, as if a careful hand had gone through history and trimmed away every piece that could tell the full story. What remained felt like whispers caught between static. According to the surviving data logs, the colony's last transmission wasn't a distress call. It wasn't even words. It was a sound, low, rhythmic, almost like breathing. The encryption algorithm was ancient, human-made, and yet it resisted all modern decoding attempts for centuries. It was only after a quantum decryption lattice was used that the sound finally revealed a pattern. 13 pulses, then silence. 13 pulses again, then silence. And embedded within those pulses was a human voice, faint, hoarse, saying one thing over and over again, "Still here." I remember sitting alone in the archive chamber when I heard it for the first time. The recording room's lights dimmed automatically as the playback began, and for a moment it didn't sound like a voice from centuries past. It sounded close, too close, like someone was standing just beyond the glass, whispering directly into my ear. I had to pause the playback twice, not because I was afraid of what it said, but because of how it said it. Not desperation, not madness, just certainty. Unshakable. Records indicate that after the 13th day of blackout, a rescue fleet was dispatched to the colony world. The ships never returned. All 13 vessels vanished from all navigation networks. Not a single distress beacon, not a single wreck was ever found. Officially, the incident was classified as a navigation failure caused by a subspace rift. Unofficially, it was treated as a ghost story, a warning to cadets and green officers about venturing too deep into the outer territories. But the manifest logs of those rescue ships showed something far stranger. Each ship made it into orbit around the colony world. They just never left. According to one fragment of flight recorder telemetry recovered from a derelict buoy decades later, their orbit decayed unnaturally fast, as if something was pulling them down. The crew attempted to fire their engines to stabilize, but the commands never executed. Not because of damage, because something overrode them. Something issued a counter-command. And the signature on that override was unmistakably human. There's a long-held assumption among galactic scholars that humans have a tendency to break the rules of survival. Statistically speaking, the colony should have died in 3 weeks. Supplies exhausted, communications down, no reinforcements, no chance. But human history is written in the margins where probabilities bend, where they refuse to die quietly. And whatever happened here was no exception. The atmospheric scans taken by passing drones a century after the event showed faint heat signatures beneath the surface. Too regular to be geological, too structured to be random. The Council dismissed them as ghost data, old readings corrupted by radiation. But I've seen those scans with my own eyes. The colony didn't disappear. It moved. Underground. The planetary crust showed signs of unnatural reinforcement, polymer structures fused with bedrock, heat signatures resembling low-power reactors, and faint EM interference fields, unlike anything in the colonists' original blueprint. That means they built something after contact was lost, something big, something meant to keep others out. Then came the anomaly. On cycle 231.4, a patrol drone orbiting the world received a handshake signal. Standard human protocol from 2 centuries ago. The ID tag matched one of the original colonists. No error, no corruption, a living ping. Except the woman it belonged to had been listed as deceased for 193 years. I've replayed that data 100 times. I've seen the signal structure, the pulse intervals, the phase modulation. There's no doubt it was real. Which raises the question no one wants to ask. If the colonists died, who sent that signal? And if they didn't die, what are they now? The last surface drone to descend into the atmosphere managed to capture only 26 seconds of footage before it was lost. There was no landscape, no ruins, no sky, just fog, thick and unnaturally still. The camera caught movement in that fog, something human-shaped but not quite right. The shoulders were too broad, the movements too smooth. And then the signal cut out. I wasn't supposed to see the raw footage. The Council keeps those things in restricted archives for a reason. But once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. The silence in that recording isn't empty. It listens. There's a pattern to the disappearances around that world. Trade vessels, research probes, even pirate skiffs. None of them make it out once they descend below low orbit. It's like the planet itself wants to be left alone. Or like whatever's down there, make sure it stays forgotten. But here's what haunts me most. One file, unmarked. Buried so deep in the archives that I only found it because it wasn't indexed properly. A personal log. Dated 43 days after the official loss of contact. The voice is shaky, breathless, but very human. A woman whispers, "We learned. We adapted. They won't understand what we've become. But they will." Then silence. And right after that silence, the sound of breathing. Not from the recorder. From something else in the room with her. According to surviving research memos, the original colonists experimented with adaptive biotech, organic nanofibers meant to help them survive harsh alien climates. The project was abandoned during transit because of instability in the gene bonding process. But desperate people make desperate choices. If they reactivated that technology on the surface, it means they changed themselves to survive. They didn't just endure, they became something else. 2 months ago, I received an encrypted transmission from an unknown source. No metadata, no origin stamp, just a single line of text. It read, "You're looking in the wrong archives. We never left. I've tried to trace it. Every route ends in noise. Every signal dissolves the moment I approach it. But last week, for exactly 13 seconds, my personal console received a handshake, the same 13 pulse pattern, and embedded in it was my name. I have no explanation for that. The colony was wiped from official star maps a long time ago. The council insists there's nothing left there but dust. But something is watching the watchers. Something remembers. Records indicate the colony had a population of 7,123 at the time of blackout. According to census algorithms, their biological signatures should have decayed to nothing within decades. But there are still readings, faint, consistent, as if thousands of heartbeats echo beneath the ground, pulsing in perfect unison. When I close my eyes, I can still hear it. 13 pulses. Silence. 13 pulses. Silence. And that voice, calm as the void between stars, whispering through centuries, still here. I will submit this report to the council archives, though I doubt it will survive the next round of redactions. They don't want this story told, not because they don't believe it, but because they do. If you're hearing this, it means the record escaped them. It means the colony's secret has slipped through the cracks once again, and maybe that's how it wants it. Hidden, waiting, watching. We used to say this was a story of human resilience, a tale of survival against impossible odds. But the truth is, it may not be about humanity anymore. It may be about something born from it, something that looks out at the stars and whispers to anyone listening. We never died. We adapted. I will not go back there. No one should. But someone will. Someone always does. And when they do, the fog will open, and the world that shouldn't have survived will reveal what it became. According to the last unsent message from the rescue fleet's admiral, her ship's internal sensors detected movement on the hull after entering orbit. The crew thought it was debris, until it started knocking back. 13 knocks. Silence. 13 knocks. Silence. I used to believe history was written by survivors. Now I wonder if history itself has been waiting. This is historian Cale Varin, last living custodian of the Outer Rim archives. If you are listening to this recording, leave the colony where it lies. It has already chosen who will be next. And somewhere, beneath that silent fog, thousands of heartbeats pulse in perfect rhythm. Waiting, watching, whispering, still here.